my ears. That one frequency hurt a bit. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Kid Icarus, subtitle Angel Land Story, even though everyone just calls it Kid Icarus, including myself, so we're just gonna forego that subtitle from here on. This is a bit of a game that I have some mixed history with. I'll go over that in a bit, though. Starting off, control-wise, D-pad's movement, obviously. A is jump. B is fire. You have a very short range, so you need to keep things in mind. Whenever you see hearts from enemies, that is currency. It's not health. It's like Castlevania 2 in that regard. Small hearts are 1 heart. Half large hearts are 5. And large hearts are 10. The little pink square on the top left of the screen, that's our health. That's about, I believe, 8 hit points when it's at full. And this game's infamous for one thing. The beginning of the game is the hardest section of the game. For a couple of reasons. First off, Pit here doesn't have that much in terms of arsenal to start. Also, harps turn enemies into mallets. You're gonna want a couple of these for the 4th stage in any given world. Whew, that should have been death. What happened there was a platform just off screen that was still technically loaded, so I stood on it. And that's another thing that makes the beginning of the game kind of hard. The game has Contra Syndrome. Anything that's technically below the screen is not there anymore. This right here is an enemy nest. There's a couple of these located throughout the game. They're a good way to get hearts as well as to practice your aim. Though there's a secondary purpose to them that involves a mechanic, I believe that's in general by fans called the skill level. Essentially, there is some hidden parameters in the game dependent on the amount of time you take damage, how many enemies you kill, what types of enemies you kill, in terms of what hearts they drop, so on and so forth. That if you reach certain thresholds at certain points, you can upgrade your weapon strength. I'll go more in depth with that when the time comes. And right there we have the thing that really makes the beginning of the game so hard. That's a Reaper. Reapers have a lot of HP for this point in the game, and if they see you, they set off an alarm where not only do they run towards you, though they can't leave platforms, they will summon, I believe they're called Reapettes, the tiny little Reapers that try to fly into you, like the little Cyclops we saw earlier. They also have this really panic-inducing theme, and it's just a lot of not scary. Oh, God. Though, if you want to farm score, Reapers are pretty useful for that in the early game. And there is a reason you would want to do that. But I just got there was a chalice that restores health. I don't think it restores you to max, technically, but it does at this point. Alright, this is a treasure room. I completely screwed that up. Treasure rooms, there are 8 pots in them, labeled, generally the way I like to look at them is that it's 1 through 4 on the left side, the 5th one in the middle, then 6 through 8 on the right side. They contain hearts, mallets, and one of them contains a Reaper. If you get the Reaper, you're done. What you're supposed to do is open as many pots as you can before getting the Reaper, and if you get the Reaper pot last, it actually turns into an item. Randomly, at that. It could be one of several things, more on what those will be when we actually get to a shop. I think there was a door at the very beginning of the stage I passed up. That was one, but not much worth. Actually, no, that wasn't worthless. That door is only really useful on second playthroughs. That's right. I'll talk more about that later. What you really want to do with the early game is take your time and don't rush, because otherwise you're going to be taking a lot of damage very, very quickly. Also, we might be wondering, how the hell do I get past these sections? As you saw me do earlier in probably a couple of occasions, this game has Pac-Man syndrome. In vertical levels like this, if you scroll to the left, you come back on the right. And they play into that with your, with the map, so you have to keep that in mind. Though it makes me wonder exactly how much this was possible in the other game that used this engine, because Kid Icarus' engine was used for another game that came out the same year by Nintendo, and that's the original Metroid. And I can certainly feel it control-wise. Either way, we're at the end of the stage right now, and at the end of every stage, the score you got throughout that stage is tallied up. Now, that doesn't seem that important right now, and for the first stage, unless you do absurd grinding, it's really not that important. But that will come into play more later on. Also, you saw a fade transition there. What that was, at the end of every stage we get into next, I reset the recording just to make sure I had every level before I screwed everything up. Because I have had occasions where I record multiple levels in a row, and then the recording corrupts, and that's just not good. Alright, now stage 2 introduces these platforms. I believe these are ice-type platforms, so you need to be careful because you will slip on these. Also, you need to collect chalices before you enter doors, because I believe they despawn if you enter a door. Whenever it comes to enemy nests, there are 2 enemy varieties in them, usually. They're all the same enemy type, but there are those that go in kind of random circular panels that try to, patterns that try to home in on you. Then you have ones like these guys who just try to go left to right. Now, there is supposed to be some sort of strategy for these. In general, I just like to go below first and hope no one tries to home into me immediately, but you need to be on your toes with these. Now, there is a plot summary for the game in its manual, but I'm not going to go over that for a few minutes because there's a couple things I want to explain in order that are coming up in pretty short sequence here. First off, as you may have noticed thus far with these little snake enemies and the mono eyes, I think they're called, I forget the enemy names. Most enemies like to spawn in this game in groups of 4. Sometimes they'll sparse themselves out in groups of like 3 and 1, 2 and 2, so on, so forth. But you might want to keep that in mind moving forward. This is the black market. There are two types of shops in the game, a standard shop and the black market. The black market sells rarer items, but they're much more expensive. Another notable difference between the shop and the black market is that there is a sort of haggling system in the game. The black market is exempt from that. And as for the items we saw in there, there was the life bottle, I believe it is, which restores a bit of vitality when your HP runs out. So essentially it prolongs your life a little bit. It's not exactly an extra life, but it prolongs it. There's the barrel, which acts as a storage for life bottles. Without a barrel, you can only carry one of them at a time. With a barrel, you can carry up to 8. Notable, it's one of the, I think it's the only item in the game that's not sold at the standard shop. So mileage may vary there with getting it. And the third item was the feather, which in vertical sections is a very useful item. What that does is it acts a bit like Beat from Mega Man 9 and 10 and some of the other games, where when you fall into a bottomless pit, he'll rescue you. And by that I mean when Pit falls into a bottomless pit, he flies up using his wings. You can hold A while you're flying as well to get some extra height. You can actually get a pretty good vertical height pretty quickly with that. So use that to your advantage. There are more items in the game, but I'll be explaining those as we encounter them. A very notable thing, though, enemies, particularly ones that walk on platforms like Reapers, can very easily be shot from below, but not quite, sort of. To explain what I mean, almost every platform type in the game in vertical levels can be jumped through except for blocks by Pit. For instance, Ice 1, standard platform, so on and so forth. So I can jump through this, however, I can't shoot through it. This is the standard shop. The only new item here sort of is the mallet, and we got some of those earlier. Those are useful in the 4th stage of every world. There is a haggling system in the game, as I mentioned earlier. The way that works is you need the second player controller plugged in, and when you have that, you press A and B on the second player controller. Dependent on your in-game level, which is determined by your score, your cumulative score between all the stages, I believe, there is a chance he will lower or raise the prices. Notable if you're playing the Famicom version, which has a better soundtrack, might I add, due to the Famicom's better sound chip. You need to scream into the second player controller's microphone. As for the price differences, that requires knowing the original prices to begin with of all the items they sell. The shops sell chalices, bottles, mallets, feathers, pencils, and torches. The last two in particular are only available in the 4th stage of any given world. And notable, the stores in non-4th levels are one of 3 layouts. They're either bottle, mallets, or feathers, chalice, bottles, and feathers, or chalice, mallets, and feathers. Feathers are always available. As for the prices, bottles are $3.50, mallets are $20, feathers are $3.90, and chalices are $2.10. Torches are $1.20s, and pencils are $180. The potential discounts will lower the chalices to $100, bottles to $2.70, mallets to $10, feathers to $1.50, but the pencil and torches stay the same price. However, if he raises the prices on you, they raise to $400, $760, $50, $630, $250, and $200 respectively, as the list goes left to right. That is expensive to say the least, so I overall, even if I had a second player controller plugged in, don't find haggling too worth it. Money is fairly easy to come by in this game anyway, so I don't have much to fear in regards to that. Alright, glad you came, Pit. Here, take this. And that's our first attack power-up. Our arrows now do 2 damage. However, this is where I get to go over the skill system. Essentially, to get a attack power-up in any stage where you can get one, you need an invisible skill value of 10,000. And skill is influenced by several things being added to and subtracted from depending on your actions. As for the exact numbers, and this is off a Game Facts guide I should add, because I'm not memorizing all this shit. You lose 300 points for taking damage, except from damaged tiles like lava. You lose 10 skill for firing an arrow, as well as lose 500 for breaking pitchers in any given treasure room, even though you want to do it in the long run. You gain 300 for entering a holy chamber, which I believe is just straight up a room, although it might be one of the ones where you either get the arrow or the other type of chamber we've yet to see. You gain 100 for defeating an enemy that drops a small heart, 300 for half hearts, and 500 for big hearts, and you gain that exact same amount of score for collecting the heart they drop, unless you go over, unless that number would make you hit 999 hearts, which is the max you can carry. At that point, you have to do more to get your score, your skill higher. You gain 100 score for collecting a mallet. You gain 1,000 for collecting or buying back a weapon, but that's a mechanic we haven't seen yet, so we'll talk more about that later. You gain 100 for buying anything in a shop that's not a chalice or weapon. You gain 300 for entering a score tally screen, which not much point to, because at that point you're already past the point where you can gain any attack ups. And you gain 8,000 for killing boss fights. Again, though, not much point to that, because there's no way you can increase your attack power in the stages where there are boss fights. This right here is lava tiles. Lava tiles, they hurt you, but it's not immediate. You have to be in it for like a few frames. Now, most of the time in early game, whenever I find a shop, I will probably only buy mallets. Feathers I like to get through other methods, and life bottles I tend to only get towards endgame. Another notable difference between black markets and normal shops, though, in black markets you can only get one item, that's it. However, in normal shops, you can buy multiple things, but it can be a bit of a time-wasting process. Because you have to obviously jump into the item to purchase it, wait for his text to scroll on screen, then kind of disappear, then he'll give you the, hey, you want to buy something prompt again? Then you can buy another thing. That can take a while. Alright, now we're going to do this treasure chamber properly. There are two background colors for treasure chambers, which generally play by different rules. There are black and there are blue ones. With the black one, I want to shoot pots 1, 2, and 8. At that point, depending on the amount of mallets that have shown up, I know where the Reaper is. In this case, I know for a fact it's in the bottom left. And for doing that, successfully not getting the Reaper, not only do I get to reap all these rewards, but I also got a credit card there. The credit card is a very interesting item. What it does, it's only usable at the black market, and when you basically try to buy an item that's worth more than the amount of hearts you have, you buy it on credit, at which point, for the next bit, you can't buy anything. I think from shops, period. Don't quote me on that, though. I think it might just be black markets. However, any hearts you collect at that point will go towards paying off your debt. Essentially, it's a dose of reality in this fictional game. I don't find much use for it. I just grab it anyway, because if I get it, hey, it's there, and if I need something, I can get it. But, nah, I'm probably not going to use it, ever. Now, how about we finally go over that plot synopsis, shall we? From the manual. The Tale of Kid Icarus. Let us go back to the distant past, to an age when gods and man lived together in harmony, heavily implied to be very Greco-Roman, by the way. There was once a kingdom called Angel Land. This kingdom was ruled by two beautiful goddesses, Palutena, who administered light, and Medusa, who ruled darkness. Palutena lived in the palace in the sky and administered light so that man could live in happiness. Bathed in this light, man grew food and lived in peace. However, Medusa, the goddess of darkness, was different. Medusa hated mankind. She took great pleasure in drying up the crops that man took great pains to grow, and in turning people into stone statues. In her anger, Palutena changed Medusa into an ugly monster and banished her to the deep, dark underworld. For being changed into this ugly monster and forced to live in the underworld, Medusa promised to take over the palace in the sky where Palutena lived. So great was Medusa's anger that she joined forces with the monsters and evil spirits of the underworld, and Medusa's army soon began to surpass Palutena's army in strength. Soon a war between Palutena and Medusa began. Medusa led a surprise attack on Palutena's army, which could barely fend off the attack. Palutena's army suffered major losses, and was heavily defeated in the final battle. What's more, Medusa's army took the three sacred treasures, the mirror shield, the arrow of light, and the wings of Pegasus, away from them. Almost all of the warriors in Palutena's army were turned into stone statues, and Palutena herself was imprisoned deep in the Palace of the Sky. The peaceful realm of Angel Land came to be inhabited by foul and terrible monsters, and was turned into the land of darkness ruled by the wicked Medusa. Locked in the depths of the Palace in the Sky, Palutena's strength was drained to its last. As a last resort, she sought help with the angel youth Pitt, who was being held prisoner locked in a deep dungeon in the underworld. Pitt was a valiant warrior who used to be in the charge of Palutena's personal bodyguards. Armed with a bow and arrow brought to him through Palutena's magical strength, Pitt attempted to escape from the underworld. The guard at this time was low in number as Medusa's army had advanced to the palace in the sky. Pitt succeeded in his escape and set out on his long adventure to rescue Palutena. Yet to defeat Medusa, he had to get all 3 sacred treasures. Will Pitt be able to restore Palutena's light and return to Angel Land? Only you can answer that question. Wow, that is way too many pages. It's like 8 pages of plot on an NES game. You don't see that too often. Usually it's like 3 to 4. Now this is what could otherwise be a holy chamber if it's not all standard rooms. This is a sacred training chamber. These are tough in early game. In fact, I might say this is the hardest thing to do in early game. We have a lot of monoliths being just thrown at us. And to this day, I still can't tell if this is time-based or if you have to get a certain amount of kills in order for this to progress. Each monolith doesn't give you a score, but at least drops a heart, so it probably gives skill points in the case that there's a strength upgrade door later on in the stage, though I think that only happens on 1 occasion. Either way, at the end of it, well done, Pitt. Take your pick. You get to choose one of 3 weapons. From left to right, I find the most useful one to be the sacred bow here in the middle, which doesn't do anything right now, but that will increase our bow and arrow's reach to the end of any given screen. The reason it doesn't work immediately is whenever you get a weapon, you need to raise your health to a certain threshold to be able to use it. And speaking of health increases, the way that works is that it's based off your cumulative end of stage score. The first health upgrade happens at 20,000 points. So now we have essentially 17 hit points, I believe. But we're not going to be able to use that health immediately for a couple reasons, both of which we will explain next part. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we'll be heading into the 4th stage of the Underworld, which is laid out a bit differently to begin with. See you guys then.